right, welcome back everybody. We are going to start, and I think there will be some more joining us. It's my distinct pleasure to moderate the panel on higher education and the science and technology market. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my view of this session. As you might realize, there are multiple different landscapes that we could be looking at. Here in this particular case, you have the landscape of science and technology, you have the landscape of courses, and you also have the landscape of jobs. And in these landscapes, you might have hills and valleys. And in these hills and valleys, you might have, for instance, new developments in science and technology, here indicated as a hill. You might also have areas of science and technology here in red, which are declining. You might have, in correspondence, courses that are also growing as new technologies are developed. And you might also have jobs in the job markets that then require these new skills to be in place so that ultimately new products can be generated and new innovations can be performed. Now, as you might also realize, there is not always a perfect match between the science technology landscape, the courses, and the jobs. And there is quite a bit of temporal dynamics. So one of the major challenges that we have to face here is that science and technology have a very, very short half-life. Some companies claim that the half-life of knowledge in STEM is 1 year. After 1 year, half of the knowledge is either obsolete, irrelevant, it's just not needed anymore. So how do you train, if you have a company with 40,000 engineers, let's say, how do you train all these engineers every single year to be on top of their game so that airplanes don't fall off the sky, which I'm deeply invested in and interested in. So how do you do this? And again, what you need to have in place is a better understanding of these different landscapes and how they align. We also have, over time, an increase in tools and artificial intelligence. So many of the jobs that previously were taken or done by human beings, they can now be performed at much higher quality and much lower price by machines and algorithms. And third challenge here, we have an increased need in social skills and project management and team leadership skills. And we also have an increasing team size, whereas maybe in former times you wanted to train the best single job seekers. Now you're actually training teams. You need people to be effective and productive when working together as a team. So let's go through that little example on the right-hand side. Again, these are different landscapes, science technology developments in the lower part. There are courses. These might be brick-and-mortar courses. These might be online MOOCs. And then there's the job market, which has its own needs and desires and ambitions. And there could be, for instance, programming where maybe you have a lot of progress in science technology developments. There are courses growing, trying to now teach all these new developments. And over time, in job market advertisements, you will also see these skills as part of job advertisements. Leadership, same. Maybe there's not so much progress in the lower landscape, but there are lots of courses, and in jobs you can also find these skills. And then there are areas which might actually move over time. So let's assume, just picking on data science here, that data science is not perfectly aligned with what's currently developed in science technology or what's currently available via courses if you look at what you find in job advertisements. So how do you deal with this? Well, you could say you just project it down in a 1 to M manner. And maybe then you arrange these two courses in the middle so that they get more closely to each other. And that's a better alignment then, and this is going to solve it. However, as you might quickly realize, this is not a single case. Oftentimes what you actually have is an M to N match, and it's not as one-on-one as I depicted it here. So how do you deal with it? And to be honest, it's many, many different stakeholders which have to have that better understanding of the match and mismatch, but they also need a better understanding of the temporal dynamic which goes on in these three different landscapes. So students might have very different questions. Some of them are listed here from teachers, might have very different questions from employees. And still, some of us actually are all three of them. I'm taking courses, I'm teaching courses, and I'm trying to hire the best. So I have all of these questions, and again, you might have your special set of questions, but ultimately, different stakeholders actually see these three landscapes in a very different way. And ultimately, I have to make a decision how to best invest my time, my money, and my compassion by picking the best people, doing a good job as a teacher, and empowering my students the best. So how do you do this? So I will just show you some approaches we have been trying to give you a better understanding of how I see this world and what might be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. So at Indiana University, we have been working on a prototype system where students which log in, so we have all of their SIS data, we know what kind of courses they took and what kind of majors they're going for, and they register themselves, and then they get a listing of jobs, and they are able to pick their dream job. Let's say engineer at a major leading software company in the US. And in this moment, they then get a trajectory, just like with a GPS system, that is either the fastest route or the most scenic route to their dream job. And the route, of course, is filled with the courses that most likely gets them a foot in the door for that particular course. And these courses could be from IU or could be from online MOOC-free resources. And ultimately, what you want to do is to not only look for fast or scenic route, but you also want to potentially look for the route which is maybe the cheapest one or has other attributes. Maybe you want to do this with your best friend. So you want to actually travel that route together. The other part which is happening here is that whenever you pick a dream job, there are other jobs which are close by, which are also possible because of that route you now selected. And many students might not realize that very close to their dream jobs, there are other jobs which are maybe even more interesting to them. They just didn't know they existed. Similar, most students also don't realize that if they pick a certain sequence of courses, certain doors are going to be shut for them. And that is a very real thing. Certain types of graduate degrees are just not possible because they miss all the prerequisites for them. So I think this kind of system can really help you navigate that landscape better as a student, but also as a mentor, because given that new courses come into existence all the time, job market requirements change, I would love to have such a system as well. Another thing we did at IU was to look at our data science program. We started it 2.5 years ago with 0 students, and now it has 650 plus students, all graduate students. And it's quite a challenge to actually get so many courses in place and to empower so many students to do a good job selecting those courses. So one part that was interesting to us was to align courses with jobs. And here we have the example of software engineer and the many courses that might be relevant for it. And so you take the course descriptions, you take the job descriptions, you extract skills using Wikipedia, very similar to what Kay Husband-Feeling has been doing. And then you have skills that are only associated with courses, not with jobs. You have skills here on the right-hand side that are only associated with job descriptions, but not with courses. And you have those skills which kind of map the courses to jobs. And I'm not proclaiming that you should only teach so that people get the job. IU teaches for 80 years. They don't teach, we don't just teach for 2 years. But ultimately, there needs to be some alignment between jobs and courses. Another piece we did was to look at how student cohorts actually make it through the set of all the courses that we now have available in that degree program. And these courses come from statistics, computer science, information library science, informatics, SPIA, Kelley School of Business. Many different departments are involved in this. And here you have the trajectories from students which started in fall 2015 and then basically finished in 2017. And it's interesting for us teachers how students went through this set of courses, what role certain courses play in terms of gatekeeper courses, so whoever makes that course is good to go, and others are weeded out, so to say. Other courses are really accelerating anyone who takes them. So if you take it, you just go at higher speed and with better engagement and better performance throughout the course set. And you can now also use this as a base map, and you can overlay high-performance students, those with good grades, and you can overlay those with less good grades. And they have vastly different trajectories through that landscape of science, and here, in this case, courses. In another project, we looked at academic career pathways. So this is funded by the NSF, and we used students and workforce data by the National Center for Education Statistics and the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics. And we looked at the impact of gender, impact of how you perform in 8th grade and other grades, looked at the impact of parent education on major selections in STEM. And again, this is a Sankey diagram. You can actually go online to this web link, and you can play with it, and you can pull down different types of attributes that might be relevant and interesting to you. And you can kind of start exploring that data set of how certain factors impact what your planned major might become and what your completed major might look like. And then finally, very near and dear to my heart, we have been teaching MOOC for the last 5 years. So this spring, it's going to be the 6th year. And in that MOOC, we have now 110 students from IU, and we have students from 100 countries, about 2,000 students from 100 countries coming in, and they all work together. And they have 7 weeks of theory and hands-on, and then they have 7 weeks of real-world client projects where they have to work together across time zones, across age ranges, across disciplinary boundaries. And it's challenging for them, but also very motivating. Many students come just for that part. It's also interesting then for me to see as a teacher where they come from, because I need to tailor my teaching efforts to this. I need to make sure that those which come from different time zones still have access to the materials. Many have very low bandwidth access, so we arranged for that, and so on. But then thanks to the course and the learning management system data access we have, we can then do quite extensive analytics of the engagement and performance patterns of these students. And over time, we can improve what we do in that course. So here you have a little bit of information about the composition of the student body and what kind of data we are capturing. Ultimately, you can take that data and you can get to see when people register, here in blue. Given that the course started back then January 22nd, you get to see how often they watch YouTube videos, which are main delivery for the theory part. They have also exams, a midterm, a final exam towards halftime of the course, and then they work in these client projects after that. You also see Twitter activity, which later on got replaced by Canvas discussion forums. In addition, we were very interested in the teams that form over time, and teams in terms of people interacting with each other on social media, but also working on these client projects together. And what you see here is a network that's color-coded by previous experience with information visualization. So you have very low in yellow, and then instructor is in green, and then the high ones are the darker red ones. You can also, of course, color-code by different skills. So for instance, to make a successful team, you typically have to have a database person, a visualization person, somebody who holds the client contact, maybe an analytics person, maybe a programmer, and then it's already 5. So you have to figure out who is playing what role in that team. And ultimately, some teams are very efficient and others are in trouble. And then we need to know about this very quickly so that we can help them. And so we implemented a more kind of dashboard-like tool where we see the engagement and performance of different students. So here you have IVMOOC students, but also students coming in through 3 different sections, courses offered via different sections at IU. And you get to see how they did in total overall on the top. And you also can click on any of these cells, and you get to see for every single student how much engagement and how much performance they actually had this week. And some of the students, they are actually skyrocketing. Maybe they were experts to begin with. And so I know I have only so much material. And if they continue like this, they're going to hit the ceiling, and then they're going to get bored. So I can now go in and give them more data, more better algorithms, or more theory, so that they keep staying in flow. And then there are also, of course, some which might have a full-time job and kids, and their employer just sends them to travel for 2 weeks, and then they're going to go down. And so I have to find a way to help them, or I recommend to them to go over to the asynchronous course. So in order to drive such a large ship, as I like to call it, with so many students that I would typically teach in 100 years, right? So the typical graduate course at IU is 20 students. Here we now have 2,000 plus students. In order to do this, we really need these kind of learning analytics, and I think you will see a lot of the learning analytics also in the other talks today. Ultimately, I believe there are many different types of questions that different stakeholders have. Some of them can be satisfied with statistical techniques. Others require temporal analytics and visualizations, such as burst analysis, for instance. There are temporal and geospatial connected questions, like how do people come in from around the globe. There are topical questions, what are they talking about in the forum right now? There are network questions, and some of those visualizations you already saw in the previous slides. And then students and teachers and researchers and developers, they have very, very different questions, actually. And it's not just that teachers need to understand where their students come from, but they also might like to know which kind of teaching strategy works better for what kind of cohort for students. Researchers might be learning scientists, which want to understand how people learn, and I think it's very important for us to understand more about it. And platform developers, of course, need to identify bottlenecks in all of this and need to make sure that the resources are always available. And ultimately, it might be the case that by seeing each other's visualizations, students understanding what teachers care about, teachers understanding what learning scientists care about, and so on. I think this way we also get to cross-fertilize and do more innovation in the teaching realm. So it's now with great pleasure that I introduce Wendy Martinez. She's going to give our first talk. And again, going forward, we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 talks. Everybody gets a half an hour. We will try to have more time for Q&A. But let's first welcome Wendy. Thank you.
You don't want to